present even before birth.
Joined by one of the most leading top authorities in self-regulation, professor of philosophy and psychology at York University, Dr. Stuart Shanker. It gives me great pleasure, the founder of the Mehrit Center as well. We don't want to leave that out. What is self-regulation?
In simplest terms, it refers to how we deal with stress and then recover. The brain has its own systems for doing this, and there are lots of things we can learn to enhance our recovery. And the problem is there's a lot of stress today.
From an educational standpoint, how dramatic is stress, especially
That's a good question.
on youth today?
We have some studies that suggest that the stress levels are the highest that we've ever seen. And the problem is that we need stress. So children and youth need to have stress. Stress wakes up the brain. Stress is, we call it the arousal factor. And education is, it's the kind of positive, good stress that we want children and teenagers to, grapple with and learn how to deal with. The problem is that if a kid comes into school already overstressed for any number of reasons, they find it very hard to deal with that extra stress load. And that's what we're seeing happening. And so right across the country now, we're seeing an increasing number of what are called internalizing and externalizing problems. And so it could be problems with mood, problems with strong emotions, or problems with behavior, problems with attention. And if anything, the problems have been getting steadily worse. So it's an issue for us.
From a teacher and a teaching perspective, from an educational perspective, what are some signs that teachers should look for to reduce stressors in the classroom?
So there are two different kinds of issues involved there. And one is the classroom environment itself, what kinds of things you can do in a classroom. So what we've learned is that if we can reduce what's called visual noise, and that's clutter, things like that, and reduce auditory noise levels, this has a huge effect. We play around with lighting a lot. We create what are called microenvironments. So we have different parts of the room where maybe there's natural lights or we take the bulbs out. We create little microenvironments where a kid can go if they just need a chance to, sort of zone out, maybe read on their own, so quiet spots. So lots of things that we can do to really dramatically reduce the stress load in a classroom. As for the kid, what are the signs? Well, there's really lots and lots of them. One of the most interesting ones is that because of stress, because of acute stress, the child's ability to hear, to process the human voice, is really substantially reduced. And so it may look like a child is not paying attention, but in fact, what's really going on is what we call stress behavior. So there are lots of different kinds of signs for when a child is experiencing a stress behavior. We look at things like their eyes, their pupils change, we look at their facial complexion. But basically, if a student or teenagers really having a lot of trouble with their attention, their behavior, or their mood, it's a pretty good sign that their stress is too high.
5 domains you discuss, they're your on topic, and of course we're going to come to providing a safe haven, so to speak, as well, so a self-regulation haven. But just touch on the 5 domains.
So the reason why we have the 5 domains are biological, emotional, cognitive, social, and prosocial. The reason why we have to do all 5 domains is because students very rarely only have stress in one domain. Even in those cases where it looks like you have such an obvious problem, say it's social stress or emotional stress, and you think, well, that's what the problem is. But invariably, what we find is you have to look at all 5 domains, and it may be a much more subtle stress than, say, a biological, which is making them vulnerable to an emotional or social stress, or it can be the opposite. So we always look at all 5 kinds of stress.
providing, from self-regulation. Of course, it starts with the teacher as well in the classroom, but from a classroom perspective to an entire school perspective, maybe discuss the self-reg and haven, if you will.
The idea behind a haven is, we have the same idea here that we use when we look at resilience. And that is that we want resources available so that teachers can negotiate and navigate their way to those resources as and when they feel ready. So the definition of a haven is very simple. The definition of a haven is where everyone in the school feels safe, emotionally and physically. But you will not be championing that process if you force teachers before they're ready to adopt these ideas. So instead what we want to make the materials that they need available. And as they see what's happening, in other classrooms where, say, you have a teacher that's really gone into this, full steam ahead, that they're tempted to say, well, I'd like to try this, or I'd like to try all of this, or that's what we mean when we talk about having a resource. And that resource might be another teacher, it might be an educational assistant, it might be the guidance counselor, it might be the principal, but that's the idea behind a haven. And eventually what we're hoping is that everyone's going to be doing this. And we hope it for their own well-being as much as for the students. Everybody benefits from this.
The impact of the Mehrit Center, take us through, the people that you're helping, and especially children that you're helping with, reducing stress and knowing those triggers and knowing how to resolve those feelings.
So Craig, that's the million-dollar question, and it's why we do this. And what we're seeing now is, it's just extraordinary. How many times, I had one just this week, a 14-year-old boy, and he was having a lot of trouble. And he's a new kid now, and this is a kid that came from a very troubled background, and now he's talking to me. I saw him just this week to check up on him, and he's talking to me about what he's going to study at university.
Wow.
And this is and the father was incarcerated. So it's just so exciting. But what we look at is across the board now, what we're seeing is really a dramatic transformation in kids that had obvious problems, behavior, whatever, but in kids that were having anxiety that nobody recognized. We didn't even see the signs. And we're also seeing it, and this is as important as the first part of your question, we're seeing it in teachers. So now one of the most exciting things for us has been the number of, we've never advertised any of this. It's all done by word of mouth.
Right.
And even at an event like we're having here today, I was shocked by the number of people that showed up.
Wow.
So this stuff is out there now.
Yeah. Well, continued success with Self-Reg. Thank you.